Hello, I am so glad you're joining us for this special episode of the Enneagram and Marriage Pod, where we're talking all about the type 2 today in relationship and about type 2 with every other type. So grateful and glad you're here with us for this. Twos, we love you and you are such givers and helpers. And today we genuinely just get to learn about you, talk about you. I have some very bright two material in my office, actually behind me if you happen to be watching on YouTube. I have a little E and M flashing neon pink sign, and pink often makes me think of twos. I also have my book here that is pink, but my husband just got me this E and M sign, and last night we were in my office, and he's like, "Hey, I have something for you. Turn on your lights," and it was so funny. I'm just like, "Thank you." It's really cool. And so I love how he's bought me that picture of he and I and this pink E and M because twos are all about let's show forth the good fruit of our relationship. We work so hard. Let's have some fun and let's show that affection and romance. And so for me, sometimes the two space is a bit far for me on the Enneagram, but I like when people like my husband or others have a two wing and can bring me closer to that emotion. So all of you twos, so thankful for you. My besties are twos. And I'm just grateful that we all balance each other out. But as we talk about twos in relationship with every other type, you might know, but you might not. You might just be jumping on because you're a two or you're in relationship with a two or you have a family friend who's a two. It's worth saying that we're going through all the types here. So if you are looking for how to relate with a nine, an eight, a seven, whatever the type, go back. We've done them all. We just have type one next week. And that will take us all through all the 45 pairing possibilities too that you do find in my book, The Enneagram in Marriage. So make sure you grab my book for a deeper dive on all the pairings. I go through all of the treatment plans basically for early stages of marriage, hard points you might hit in whatever pairing. And we'll talk about those on a brief level today with two in each of the types. So that's fun too, that we get a taste of that and we get to just learn how do you relate well with a two today? Because that's really what we're here about. But don't forget that there's also the bonus chapter. If you've ordered my book, maybe you've read it, maybe you're in the middle of it, maybe you're using it as a reference for your marriage or relationship. Don't forget my new digital chapter copy is available to you. And that is by just emailing us at enneagramandmarriage@gmail.com or replying to any of our newsletters to just say, hey, got the book. Here's a copy of the receipt or a picture of the book or the Kindle screenshot, anything just to show us you've got it. We'll send it your way. And you can get that digital copy of how to walk through the sexual issues you might be having too. And that was a chapter I just knew needed to be in my book, but there wasn't room for it. So here we go. It's so fun that we can reveal it later. And then last but not least, before we get going on our twos here, just know that also for those who are just live types of people, which I actually know a lot of twos are, I will be live sharing my book at the Barnes& and Noble UTC Sarasota area on the 21st of July from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. if you would like to join me there too. I'm really excited about that. And I love hanging and doing book signings and meeting other authors. So I'm excited to have been chosen by our Barnes& and Noble for that day. And I don't think they've done anything yet. It's a newer Barnes& and Noble. So I'm excited to be part of, I think, their first author event. So really geeked out for that. Hope you can join me, especially if you're a local or if you happen to be on vacay. And we had a really fun summer vacay. If you watched our Instagram pictures, I saved it under exploring. If you come back to my highlights, you can see. And again, our twos remind me on Instagram, here, other places, relationships are important and worthy. And for those who might be married to somebody who likes information like me, or who likes to think of the world in terms of right and wrong, like the eights, nines, or ones, twos kind of come to us with that refreshment of, wow, like this is about each other, spending time together, quality time together, not just listening to a song or tuning each other out or watching a movie, but being together, talking about our hearts, talking about our dreams, really connecting our souls together. And so there's something beautiful and very romantic about twos that, like I said, I think people are very thankful when they get in relationship with a two. But I also know sometimes twos can be taken for granted when people feel like, okay, I've already got this great relationship partner. They've easily seem to have met all of my needs. And now I'm just going to move on to other things. And so it's so important that Twos that you stand for yourself in your healthy eight mode. That is the arrow that we use in Enneagram language to say when twos get really assertive, it's a really healthy move for them to say, here's my needs in the relationship too. Another really important place is for twos to stop and use their thought processes to think about themselves, not just how can I serve this person? How can I serve this community? That is so important and so beautiful. And we would definitely not want you to forget how beautiful and powerful that is, but to also be able to say, if I'm going to make it the long haul, I better also consider every single day what is mine to do? What is my spiritual practice so that I can come back to myself each day and have enough balance? And that will help you to give for the longer haul as well, as we know. So I love that for you when you can remember that as a two. And I love for your spouse or partner to be part of reminding you of that. So I do want you to accept that influence twos. Take a nice deep breath. If you're hearing me say that, I'm going to give you a moment to take a deep breath while I sip my tea. And that's probably a challenge for some of you. Some of you are probably like, girl, like, come on, I got to move on. I got to be going. I'm listening to this on two speed. But the truth is, I want you to know too, is there's almost nothing more important for you to do in your relationship than slow down. Because just as you want your spouse to tune into you and to connect with you, so do you have to make the opportunity for it. And the busier you get, the less that happens, the more resentful you both grow. So you have to see that we can get into positive feedback loops where we say, okay, twos are great givers. When they learn what's theirs to do, they can give in refined ways that will allow them to give for the long haul and to have boundaries to say no and to activate their voices with their spouse or partner. But then we also know when they get in a negative loop, it looks like twos saying yes to everything, going into a space of pride and feeling like they're God's right hand, and that if they don't do it, nobody will, and that God isn't running the world without them. And it's a sense of this entitlement of position. And so, what you want to do is come away from that because that just breeds one negativity after the next, like I said, with your marriage, with your relationships, with your overwhelmed state. And if you remember Danielle Fuller's episode, we learned that twos often do struggle with anxiety. And that's what I heard from them way back when I did my mental health episode as well. So keep it in mind too is that to protect your mental health, just to be able to say, I love giving. So I've got to protect where I give. That is so important and so valuable. So know that, as much as today's modern person wants to be able to do everything well, I think it's more realistic to say, what are the things I'm really good at and that I love and that I have time for? Because time is another important resource. And then, as I mentioned, when you get the self care, really learning the different kinds of self care you might need. So you may say, oh, I love to get my nails done, but that doesn't allow you any emotional decompression. Whereas you might also, honestly, for self care, just need some time in a journal or in your car out loud talking to God. And another way you might say I decompress is by slipping into a story, a novel that you're reading, or a glass of wine. But then you realize, oh my gosh, I'm stuffing things away because I'm using those to access. So, looking to really allow for some expansiveness around your self care is really an important step for twos that I welcome you to. Because, again, when you do this practice well, you will find that you are getting the emotional release you need. Some physical release. If you remember Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith on the podcast, her excellent episode on rest would be a great one to go back to. And she had to find that out the hard way as a medical provider whose many patients were having such high symptoms of stress. And she realized it was bringing disease into their lives. So it's just important that you remember your sleep, your rest, your times of emotional rest, your times of physical rest, and even creative rest, because another great space for you twos is in your four arrow, which is the space of deep thinking. It's in the space of allowing some sadness in as needed. It's in the space of being able to pull away and not be codependent all the time on others for your worth. Sometimes fours still struggle with that. That's where your eight side can also come in. But also, that four space is good for, as I mentioned, creativity. And not just the fast, like moving the furniture to sort of classic trope you hear about. That's sort of helpful and healthy. But doing the deeper dive that says, it's not just going to be furniture or beauty, because I have worth no matter what I look like or how my home looks. It's about those things too, because that's a gift. But it's also about me just stopping to pause before God and finding community that loves me just as I am. that is a really good space for you. And you already do that. That's the good news. As a two, you do that so well with your spouse and your friends. And you worry about them sometimes, of course, but you love them no matter what. But remember to find people who also love you no matter what, so that you're not having to always have that Karen on a stick, like you didn't deserve to be loved. No, you do deserve to be loved already. In my view, faith perspective, you're a child of God. And I really hope that you hold dear to some values too that offer you that sense of belovedness, the way that I see you. And I hope you know that you are seen ultimately. So take some time spiritually to practice that too if you're in the sour place about yourself, or create an affirmation journal, even that will help you to develop that truth for yourself as well. And that could just simply be a journal that you discover to really allow you to see page by page good memories that you've had with your friends, in your family, and the things that people have built you up with. I know I'm going to be leaving my two bestie a message soon on Voxer and encourage her. Have people like that in your life. I sent her a funny meme today. Just make sure you surround yourself with people who pour back into you too. And if you haven't done that in a while, it's okay to reseason your friends a little bit, to say, okay, you know what? She's really busy over here. He's really busy over here. I think I'm gonna try to delve in and create some new relationships too. Like that's very worthy, and it's a good humble space for a two, because usually twos are like relationships come easily, but sometimes they don't. All seasons are different, so you might have to work for it to find the people who in this season can bless you back versus you just giving and giving. And your spiritual life will help as you slow down and begin to pause, to reflect, to allow for a bit of sadness, to allow for a bit of shifting, to allow yourself to come back to your spouse. And then last but not least, before we talk type by type about the two with each type, just remember that often your spouse has a way of being and their own values in the world that don't exactly line up with everything you would like for them to be or to do or to act like for you. And so continue to clarify what your needs and desires are, but also allow them to love you in their way. It's a both and. And so just relishing and cherishing our practices I'd love to see you do, where you can allow yourself to just say, oh my gosh, like at first I was maybe mad that they gave me this gift when really what I wanted was a date. But now I'm just going to allow myself to look at that gift and see how they traded their time for that gift, or vice versa. So those are good reminders for you. And I'm so grateful for you twos being such beautiful helpers and givers in the world. Keep that up. And now we're going to pause to take a moment to talk about the two in every type in relationship. Okay, let's go. So the two with type one, this is a great pair. There's a lot of super ego strength here in terms of just parent energy. So there's a lot of nurture toward one another, a lot of consideration for one another, a lot of listening to one another, and a lot of dutifulness. So where this pairing can, of course, get into a little bit of a trouble spot is that as beautifully matched as they are, sometimes it can feel a little bit hectic and chaotic, even with all the best of intention and even if they're very orderly in general. So make sure that you allow yourself actual margin and space to love each other after and during all the love you're pouring out to others. And of course, make sure you also mention to each other, hey, I know we want to both go the long haul. So let's really try not to feel as guilty about taking time out just for us. And that's going to be hard for both of you in different moments. So holding each other to dates that are sacred is good. Learning to how to work with extended family who has high expectations and both of you want to meet them is good. Maybe even visiting a therapist, even when there's nothing big going on, is another good practice you could consider, so that you can mitigate for just having support that somebody else can help the two of you to set boundaries together. I've done that for some one twos and I've enjoyed that. Now, the two with another two, we come into the space of possibilities of extreme codependence, as much as we come into the space of great joy, great giving, great love. Just as with the one, but even a smidgen more, we find two compliant types who are very dedicated towards meeting the other's needs. And yet sometimes their own needs go without being met because there's a sense of not knowing how to really survive on your own. And I totally get that. And that goes very much with the Sue Johnson sort of hold me tight materials I love from her EFT, the late Sue Johnson. And yes, it's beautiful to want to be held tight and to be loved, but it's also, it is another both and. It is okay to say, I am in this space where I need time alone so I can reflect on my values, get my rest, and also individuate a bit. That is so healthy. Not to put all your eggs in that basket of your spouse's achievements for you or affirmations of you. Just learning that you can be independent and forage for yourself a bit is really a nice virtue. And I've seen twos into old age who had another two or another person like this with them. And, when one passes first, there's got to be a sense of your own ways of walking through the world versus like, okay, well, now I'm just going to rely on kids to do that for me or friends. It's like you've got to really do your own work too. So, again, a journal can be good to affirm yourself in self care practices and time alone. Just very important, hard, even if it brings up anxiety, do it. Now, the 2, 3 I talked about on 3 episodes, so you can listen to that too. But to give a little bit of a different piece of information, instead of just saying, hey, this is a great pairing to work together a lot. They're really good at that. Yes, that's all true. But to add to that, this is a pairing where there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of desire to serve the world. And so when you come into somebody, as the 3 is, who wants to really achieve in the world, and the 2 wants to really give in the world, if you're not aligned on some of your projects, it can actually be quite the opposite of a lot of time together and be a ton of time apart. So it's extremely important that you find some of your values together and graft them in together if they're not. So if you're like, oh, I've been giving to my bowling team, this is so random, but just, for these last 10 years, I've enjoyed it. And we're in a northern state and it's a nice, fun indoor activity. And the other person says, well, I've really been enjoying my skiing time and that's been everything to me. And I'm on the club for that. And I, raise money for that at the fundraisers for this mountain resort and in protecting endangered animals. You never know what the little pieces are going to be because you're both such givers. Try to figure out what are at least half of the things you're doing that you guys can merge. And some of them you'll win, some of them your partner will win. More importantly, I want you guys to find ways to be a team and to say, okay, here's one I think I can just let you do occasionally and then I'll step out. But here's one we really can concentrate on together because with both of you being codependent at times, it's very important that you don't become that way towards other partners and people. So I want you to do some of that connecting together and I just want to remind you of how very separate it can be if you're not careful. Now, the 2 with the 4, last one to talk about that extreme codependence possibility. There's a lot of harmony here too. So I want to affirm you both that you are people who get that the other one and the people around you matter greatly and dearly. And you're very thoughtful of nurturing and loving on the people in your community, both of you. And there's just such a kindness to that perspective. But where it's hard is how it is for any 2, 3, or 4 in any pairing together. There's a lot of need for attention and a lot of rejection wounds between you. So you need to find good boundaries with other parties. You need to make sure that you have very special date nights where you are affirming each other, celebrate holidays and anniversaries and birthdays big for not just the kids, but each other too. And you'll be doing a lot better. Again, get support if it gets sticky and addictions start coming in. It's so critical that you get that support. Now, 2 and 5 are the ones who inspired the glow guides, my pairing guides for each type that came out before my book, because I saw so many at the time and I said, gosh, there's a lot of similarities between all these 2 5s. And they really do, just like we all do. You really do change each other. So, what I love about 2 5s is that 5s help 2s to become a lot more able to stand on their own 2 feet and a lot more able to say no. And then, of course, 2s help 5s to become more expansive. So, I do want you to keep doing that. But I want you to know that where it can get sticky is 2s can manipulate 5s, and 5s can become very controlling and dominant over the 2. So it can be very backhanded on the 2, like, I'm just going to go around you because I don't like how you are. And then the 5 can say, well, I'm going to command you because nobody controls me and I'm going to control this tight ship. And it just can be really hard. So 5s have to really allow yourselves to become more expansive, to take a lot more deep breaths, to realize your 2 is going to mess some things up because they love relationships. And 2s, you have to realize, you know what, your 5 is going to mess up some of your plans because they're thinking ahead for you on what will work long-term strategy wise, very logically. And when you guys can realize that your pairing has gifts to give each other, there's a lot of grace, even though you're still going to have to work it out. It's not going to be perfect. It's yet so beautiful, though. I love the ways that you continue to carry each other with that romance. Now, 2 and 6, you're both very caring types. And again, we come back to some cultural compliance together. So, what's beautiful about that 2 and 6 bond is that you both really allow yourselves to serve loyally in your community. You both really will probably gear towards things that each other likes because you're so thoughtful, and you're going to mitigate for troubleshooting with your 6 saying, "Hey, I don't want to be always apart." So, I love that. And I'm going to encourage the 2 to lean into some of the 6's things and the 6 to lean into some of the 2's things, just like I said for some of the other pairings, if you heard. But also, I want you guys to make sure that you allow your anxiety to be worked through because we know 6's are an anxious type. We know a lot of 2's have underlying anxiety about eating, about the ways they look, about rejection wounds. And so, just to be able to say, here's my self soothing practices that are healthy, here's yours, and how can we hold each other accountable to those and have some fun amidst our hard work and caring and giving and loyal loving, very big. And also making sure you guys have people that love your marriage too, and support you guys. Now, 2's and 7's, as you heard me say, ball of fun over here. Where the big rub can come in, however, is that the 2 can want a lot more relationship nurture time, and the 7 can want a lot more cognitive time or experiential time. So the 7 can be quite content in many ways to just be near each other, to be ingesting information or organizing life and moving quickly. Whereas a lot of the time, the 2 wants to actually sit down and talk heart to heart. And I think that it can be very anxiety provoking on both sides. So, talking about what are some shared values is a great way to connect. Some of the ways I've done that with the 2's in my life as a 7 have been to really find what does align and talk a lot about that. So, when I talk with my 2 besties, I usually say, here's what's going on with me for work because I want to talk all about that, and just like here's my goals, here's my dreams, here's what I'm working on theoretically. And yet they're like, tell me about your family. How's everybody doing? And so I let them balance me. And I hope that they also do the same for me. I try though to ask them about family. So I'm like, that's already what you like talking about. So I'm not going to push you in another direction. So just try not to push if you're a 7. I just don't feel like that works very well. And then sometimes when they do want to talk about their work, if they're a 2, yeah, go with it, but know what they love. Now, if you're a 2 with an 8, there's a lot of similar threads here because the 2 and the 8 have very similar arrows to each other. So the 8 can really make space to empower the 2. The 8 can really help the 2 to find their traction when it comes to voice, when it comes to empowerment. In terms of specifically, you have worth, and we're not going to let people break down your boundaries or stomp on you. And yet, the 8 can sometimes do that to the 2 themselves by saying, "Oh, my needs are more important and we've got to take care of me." So you're going to have to watch that your 2 is getting self care and that you're not taking over. And 2s, you're going to have to watch that you're not trying to sideline and manipulate your 8 backhandedly if they are missing a lot of your needs, but to just know that 8s love clarity. So to bring clarified positioning, even if you have to do it a few times, so important so that they know, here's what I need to. I'm using my 8 voice. And then I really like how you both share a 2 arrow. So when you're feeling like you need some adventures, make sure you guys find ways to give back to the community. It's such a like beautiful space for both of your hearts, honestly. And I love that about your pairing, how generous you are together. So make sure you do that often. And then last but definitely not least are 2s and 9s. We know some famous Enneagram couples in this space, several, but Suzanne Stabile comes to mind. And I want you to know that there are so many beautiful bylines together with this pairing of peace and love. And we also always add to that finding ways to rest and connect together because we know the 9 brings the rest, the 2 brings the connection. And just to make sure it's a 9 that you don't just check out when it's time to rest, that you don't just find your way to personal coziness, but find ways to draw your 2 into that space and say, hey, you work so hard, let me take you away and whisk you away on some comfort. And 2s do enjoy their hedonism with you after all the serving and giving. And then 2s, make sure you also bring your 9 in by saying, your harmony is great. I love that you harmonize with everybody. I do too. You probably even share a Myers Briggs in that way. But we also need to make waves out there, and it might hurt or cost or, make our peace be away for a little bit, but it's worth it. And with the two of you balancing each other out, it's much better and it's going to last a lot longer and you're going to have refreshment and keep giving. So that's why I love your pairing. But anyway, there's something beautiful about each and every pairing. And that's why it took a long time to write this book and to really get it out there. So please grab a copy and of course, your digital chapter, if you haven't already, at enneagramandmarriage@gmail.com. I am so glad for you and the special time we've had on the series. I'm looking forward to type one next week. Stick around. Make sure you also stick around for the contests and fun we're having over at Instagram this week with giveaways. And as I said, if you're around locally, Sunday, July 21st, 2024, I'll be at the Barnes& and Noble, UTC Sarasota from 11 to 1 to see you in person too. So hope to see you there. Talk to you later. Bye bye.